If my husband hadn't seen the warning signs before anyone else, I would have lost everything we'd spent years building. And the person who almost took it from me wasn't a stranger. It was my own daughter-in-law. Even now, when I think back to those months, I can still feel the knot that lived in my stomach. It started the day my husband came home from the hospital and lied straight to my face. Not because he wanted to hurt me, because he was trying to protect me. My name is Sienna Carter, and 2 years ago, I thought I had a happy life. I was 36 years old, happily married to my husband Rowan, and helping manage the commercial property company we had spent over a decade building together. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. At least, that's what I believed. Everything changed on a Thursday afternoon. Rowan walked through our front door after a doctor's appointment and barely said a word. That alone was enough to worry me. My husband was the kind of person who could turn a simple trip to the grocery store into a 20-minute story. Silence wasn't part of his personality. Yet that afternoon, he dropped his keys on the kitchen counter, poured himself a glass of water, and stood staring out the window. For nearly 15 minutes. I watched him from the kitchen. Something was wrong. I could feel it. "How'd the appointment go?" I finally asked. He didn't look at me. "Everything's fine." The second he said it, I knew he was lying. After 12 years of marriage, I knew every version of Rowan's voice. I knew when he was happy. I knew when he was stressed. And I definitely knew when he was scared. For the next 3 weeks, he avoided every question. Whenever I brought up the appointment, he changed the subject. Whenever I asked if something was bothering him, he smiled and told me not to worry. But his behavior kept getting stranger. He spent hours reviewing company documents. He made private phone calls outside. He scheduled meetings he never explained. Several nights, I woke up and found his side of the bed empty. I'd walk through the dark house and find him sitting alone on the back patio, just staring into the darkness. Like a man carrying a burden he didn't know how to share. Looking like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Then one evening, he finally told me the truth. I wish I could say I handled it well. I didn't. The moment the words left his mouth, my entire world shattered. "It's cancer." Those 2 words changed everything. I felt the blood drain from my face. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe. Rowan reached across the dining table and grabbed my hand. The expression in his eyes told me everything, before he even continued. It was serious. Very serious. The doctors had found an aggressive form of liver cancer. And by the time it was discovered, there weren't many treatment options left. I remember shaking my head, over and over, as if refusing to believe him would somehow change reality. It didn't. The following hour felt like a nightmare. I listened as he explained treatment plans, specialist appointments, and survival statistics. But honestly, I barely heard half of it. All I could think was that the strongest man I'd ever known was suddenly talking about time running out. Eventually, I broke down crying. Rowan moved beside me and wrapped his arms around me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that completely caught me off guard. "Sienna, I need you to do something." I looked up. "Anything." "I need you to move all of our money." I blinked. "What?" "Every joint account, every investment account, everything." I stared at him. At first I thought the diagnosis had affected his judgment. But then I saw how serious he was. This wasn't panic. This was planning. "Why?" I asked. For the first time that night, anger flashed across his face. Not fear, not sadness, anger. And then he said a name I never expected to hear. Delaney. My stomach dropped. Delaney Monroe, my daughter-in-law, the wife of our son, Ryder. The woman who had somehow managed to create tension in nearly every room she entered, while still convincing outsiders she was charming. When Ryder first introduced her 4 years earlier, I genuinely tried to like her. She was beautiful, confident, polished. She always knew exactly what to say. At first, I thought she simply had a strong personality. But over time, I started noticing things. The way she manipulated conversations, the way she subtly criticized people while pretending to compliment them, the way she always steered discussions toward money, status, or possessions. Nothing was ever direct. Everything was calculated. The worst part was watching what happened to Ryder. Before Delaney entered his life, my son was independent, confident, thoughtful. After they married, something changed. Slowly, he stopped making his own decisions. Every opinion became Delaney's opinion. Every major life choice somehow benefited Delaney. And every disagreement ended with Ryder defending her, no matter how unreasonable she was. I hated admitting it. But I often felt like I'd lost my son, long before I lost my husband. Rowan sighed heavily. Then he told me something that made my skin crawl. Apparently, Delaney had recently started contacting attorneys connected to our company. Not one attorney, several. She'd been asking questions about ownership rights, business succession, inheritance structures, estate transfers. The kinds of questions people ask when they're expecting someone to die. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How does she even know about your diagnosis?" I asked. Rowan shook his head. "I don't know." That answer bothered me, because we'd been incredibly careful. Only a handful of people knew about his condition. Yet somehow, Delaney appeared to know enough to start planning ahead. And that terrified me. "What do you think she's trying to do?" I asked quietly. Rowan looked directly at me. "Take control." The room fell silent. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was overreacting. But deep down, I couldn't. Because it sounded exactly like something Delaney would do. The next question was even harder. "What about Ryder?" Rowan looked away. That single reaction told me everything. The truth hurt. Not because Delaney was greedy. We already knew that. The painful part was knowing our son probably wouldn't stop her. Over the following weeks, I followed Rowan's instructions. I opened new accounts, transferred funds, updated records, signed paperwork, reviewed documents. Every time I completed another task, I felt guilty. Like I was preparing for something I couldn't bear to imagine. Meanwhile, Rowan became even busier. He met privately with lawyers, reviewed corporate structures, made changes I wasn't fully aware of. Whenever I asked questions, he simply smiled and told me to trust him. One rainy evening, after we'd finalized the last transfer, Rowan handed me a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front. Nothing else. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. I frowned. "What's inside?" "If everything goes the way I hope it does, you'll never need to open it." That answer only made me more curious. But before I could ask another question, he placed his hand over mine. And for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. Acceptance. As if he'd already made peace with something I still refused to acknowledge. "Promise me," he said quietly. I I swallowed hard. I promise. I took the envelope upstairs and hid it deep inside a storage box in the back of our bedroom closet. Then I tried to forget about it. At the time, I had no idea that piece of paper would eventually destroy every plan Delaney had spent months putting into motion. And I certainly had no idea that only a few weeks later, my husband would be gone. The next 6 weeks passed faster than I thought possible. Every day felt like a race against a clock neither of us could see. Some mornings, Rowan seemed almost normal. We'd drink coffee together, discuss company projects, and pretend life hadn't changed. Other days were different. The treatments left him exhausted. His energy faded. The man who had always been the strongest person in every room was slowly being worn down by a battle he couldn't win. Still, he never complained. Not once. His focus remained on me, on protecting me, on making sure I would be okay after he was gone. I wish I had understood just how much he was preparing behind the scenes. Because I would have paid closer attention. I would have asked more questions. I would have spent less time hoping for a miracle, and more time appreciating every moment we had left. One Sunday morning, just after sunrise, Rowan passed away. I was holding his hand when it happened. The room was quiet, peaceful. For a few seconds, I sat there staring at him, waiting for him to open his eyes again. But he never did. The hardest thing I've ever done was walking out of that hospital without him. For 12 years, he had been my partner, my best friend, my safe place. And suddenly, I was alone. The following days felt like a blur. Phone calls, flowers, relatives, condolences. Everyone seemed to be speaking, yet I couldn't remember a single conversation. I was simply trying to survive, 1 hour at a time. Then, 3 days after Rowan's death, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I immediately felt something wasn't right. Standing outside were Ryder and Delaney. But they weren't alone. Beside them stood a man wearing an expensive charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase. I had never seen him before. "Mom," Ryder said nervously, "this is Grant Mercer." The stranger extended his hand. "Estate attorney." I stared at him. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Estate attorney? My husband hadn't even been buried yet. I stepped aside and allowed them inside, because I was too shocked to react. The four of us sat around the dining room table. The same table where Rowan had told me about his diagnosis. The same table where we'd spent years planning our future. Now, it felt like a battlefield. Grant opened his briefcase and began removing folders. Delaney sat beside him, looking unusually confident, almost excited. That was when a terrible realization hit me. This wasn't a family visit. This was a business meeting. And they had come expecting something. Grant cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss succession matters and future ownership interests." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I raised my hand. My husband died 3 days ago. Grant gave me a rehearsed apology, but it felt hollow, empty. Like he delivered the same speech dozens of times before. Delaney leaned forward. "We just think it's important to understand how everything is structured." There it was, the real reason they were there. Not grief, not concern, not family. Money. I looked at Ryder. My son couldn't even meet my eyes. That hurt more than anything Delaney could have said. Because deep down, I realized he knew exactly why they were there. Grant continued speaking. ownership percentages, corporate assets, control structures, future transitions. The entire conversation felt like vultures circling before the funeral had even happened. Finally, I stood up. My voice trembled with anger. "Get out." Nobody moved, so I repeated myself, louder. "Get out of my house." The room went silent. For a moment, Delaney looked genuinely shocked, as if she couldn't believe I would challenge her. Then she gathered her purse. Grant packed his documents, and within minutes, they were gone. The second the front door closed, I broke down. Not because of Delaney, not because of the attorney, because of Ryder. My own son had chosen that moment, 3 days after losing his father, to help his wife hunt for money. I sat alone in the house for nearly an hour. Then suddenly, I remembered the envelope. The one Rowan had hidden, the one he'd made me promise to protect. My heart started racing. I ran upstairs, opened the closet, pulled out the storage box, and found the envelope exactly where I'd left it. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. Then I opened it. The first page immediately changed everything. Rowan hadn't spent his final months preparing for death. He'd spent them preparing for betrayal. Over a year earlier, he had quietly restructured the company. Every controlling share, every voting right, every executive authority had already been transferred into my name. Legally, permanently. I read the documents twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The company belonged to me. Not Ryder, not Delaney. Me. The next pages revealed something even more shocking. Rowan had anticipated exactly what might happen after his death. He had created a protected trust for Ryder, a generous one. But the money couldn't be accessed until years later. And no spouse would ever have legal rights to it. Not through marriage, not through divorce, not through inheritance. Nothing. Delaney was completely locked out. I finally understood why Rowan had looked so calm during those final weeks. He already knew they couldn't touch what we'd built. But the story didn't end there. In fact, that was only the beginning. A few days later, I met with our longtime corporate attorney, Marisol Bennett. After reviewing the documents, she became concerned about one detail. How had Delaney known enough to start preparing before most of the family even knew Rowan was seriously ill? The timing didn't make sense. So Marisol started asking questions, and eventually, she found answers. The investigation uncovered something none of us expected. Months before Rowan passed away, someone had illegally accessed portions of his confidential medical records. The access trail eventually led to a clinic employee, a woman who happened to have a long-standing friendship with Delaney. The more investigators dug, the worse it became. Phone records, messages, meetings. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. Delaney had been gathering information long before anyone else knew how serious Rowan's condition really was. She wasn't planning after his diagnosis. She was planning before most people even knew one existed. The fallout was enormous. The clinic employee lost her position. Investigations followed. Lawsuits followed. And Delaney suddenly found herself dealing with legal problems far bigger than inheritance. The woman who thought she was about to gain control of a successful company was now fighting to protect her own future. Ironically, she spent more money on attorneys than she ever could have gained from us. Then one afternoon, several months later, Ryder called. For the first time, he asked to meet alone. No Delaney, No lawyers, just him. When he walked into Marisol's office, I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted, older, defeated, like someone who had finally woken up from a long dream. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he apologized. Not with excuses, not with explanations. A real apology. He admitted he should have stopped the meeting. He admitted he ignored warning signs. And he admitted that he had allowed Delaney to influence decisions he never would have made on his own. For the first time in years, I saw my son again. Not Delaney's husband, not someone trying to impress her. My son. I won't pretend everything healed instantly. It didn't. Trust takes years to build, and seconds to break. What happened left scars on both of us. But slowly, things improved. 8 months later, Ryder and Delaney finalized their divorce. By then, their marriage had collapsed under the weight of everything that had happened. As for me, I continued running the company. The same company Rowan and I had built from the ground up. With help from the leadership team he carefully assembled before his passing, the business continued growing. In many ways, it became stronger than ever. Sometimes people ask if I hate Delaney. The truth is, I don't. Hatred requires energy, and she's no longer worth that energy. What I feel is gratitude, because her greed revealed something important. It showed me just how much Rowan loved me. Even during the hardest months of his life, when he was facing the unimaginable, he was still thinking about how to protect me. How to protect our future. How to protect the life we'd built together. Most people think love is grand gestures, romantic speeches, perfect moments. But I've learned something different. Real love is planning for someone's safety, even when you know you won't be there to see the result. And thanks to Rowan's foresight, the people who thought they were about to take everything from me ended up walking away with absolutely nothing. If you've ever dealt with betrayal from family or someone who underestimated you, let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about revenge, justice, and unexpected comebacks, make sure to subscribe to Revenge's Diary Official, because the next story might be even more shocking than this one. Thanks for listening.